Welcome to Power Hour, where the editors of Powersports Business interview the movers and shakers of the powersports industry.
Hi, everybody. It's Brendan Baker, Powersports Business, and another Power Hour. And speaking of power, we've got Scott Schloegel, who is the MIC Senior Vice President of Government Relations, and he's located in the seat of power in Washington. Are you in Washington, Scott? You
Just across the river in Arlington, Virginia, but close enough.
okay?
Yeah, I could throw a stone over
Pretty
the river
close.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. So Scott, welcome and thank you for coming on here. And I know there's been a lot going on, in your neck of the woods with your side of things, especially in the past year. I mean, last year seemed like it was nonstop tariffs, right? It was okay, what's going on here? And there were a lot of other things moving in the background, but tariffs seemed to dominate that. Now this year, tariffs haven't gone away, but there's other things cropping up. What do you see are kind of the big issues that you're tackling for the MIC and for power sports industry in general and for dealers?
Yeah. Well, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me on, Brandon. I really appreciate it. It's great to be with you. There's a lot of issues that we've got going on right now, both across all 50 states as well as at the federal level. Some of them include the tariffs, which they continue to go on because even though there was a ruling earlier this year that the IEEPA tariffs were illegal, there's additional stuff that I'm happy to talk about. PFAS chemicals, the forever chemicals and bans that they've got on PFAS in various states across the country, as well as some discussion at the federal level. Big extended producer responsibility, EPR, which is impacting the manufacturers as well as dealers when they're having to take back certain things like batteries or textiles or packaging related issues. Then there's always the public lands issues, which is, without public lands and access to state and federal public lands, most of our folks don't really have somewhere to ride. They're off road, at least on the four-wheel side of things, and certainly the off-road dirt bikes or our dual sports. And then there's just a number of bills that are going on at the federal level right now because the highway bill needs to be reauthorized once every 5 years. And there's several bills that are within that highway reauthorization I'd be happy to chat with you about.
Cool. I mean, yeah, like I said, there's a lot there, and I don't know how
Yeah.
you keep it all straight, so what is your daily grind? I mean, are you over at the Capitol a lot to talk with representatives and senators and whoever will listen? I mean, how does this work?
Yeah, well, first off, we have a great team here that works in the government relations team. We've got 9 of us that do really good work, kind of focusing in on different issues across the country. 2 of us do federal issues. The rest of the team does state issues, and they've all got kind of their lanes that they play within. So a really good team here. My typical day could be that I'm up on the Hill meeting with elected officials. It could be that I'm over at the administration meeting with the U.S. Trade Representative folks or EPA folks or the Chief of the Forest Service. It really all kind of just depends on the day. And then it could be that you're testifying in a particular state about some legislation that's pending there that could impact us as well. So really kind of an across the board. I always say that there is no typical day here for me. It's just
Right.
kind of putting out fires nonstop around. So yeah.
Yeah, and tried. So, let's start with what's going on with tariffs, because that was the big issue last year all the way through the year pretty much. Where are we standing with that? I know that Supreme Court struck down the tariffs, but now they're going at it a different way, but it's still affecting things. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So well, I'll take you back. I'll give you a little bit of history real quickly. And that is in the first Trump administration, the president wanted to combat China and the oversized influence that he saw coming in from China. And so he did what are called Section 232 and Section 301 tariffs back then. Those are both really prescribed areas where the 232 tariffs go through the Department of Commerce, the 301 tariffs go through the U.S. Trade Representative Office. but they have a process whereby they study it, find out if there's a problem, declare what the problem is, solicit input from the manufacturers and the public, and then they decide on what they're going to impose. And as part of that whole process, you can request exclusions, right? So we were really successful during the first Trump administration in getting some exclusions for our products, things like helmets, things like wiring harnesses and certain switches and low displacement motorcycles, those that are under 50 cc's, for example, were excluded from a lot of those tariffs. Then Biden kept most of those tariffs in place. Fast forward to the second Trump administration, what he did was he realized that that's too cumbersome of a process, right? It takes too long to do that because it's about 6 months to kind of from start to finish to get the study done, solicit comments, come up with a decision, and then implement. So he decided to use something that had never been used before, which is the IEEPA tariffs, they call them, the emergency tariffs. Never had been used before, implemented those across the board for all countries, then varied the different levels. And so it was kind of on, it was
like
off.
when he came out with the big board and goes, this is it. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's what he did early on in his administration. Then he changed them around a bunch. Lawsuits were out there. The Supreme Court decided earlier this year that those were illegal and that they have to now refund all of those tariffs back to the folks who had paid the tariffs, not the Chinese, the American consumers and businesses that were the ones who paid that, contrary to the popular rhetoric that was out there. So once that decision came down, he then said, oh, okay, well, instead, I'm going to use this Section 122 tariff, which also has never been used before, but it's a shorter term tariff whereby he can implement emergency tariffs for up to 150 days. And then after that 150 days, Congress can come back and vote to extend them if they want to. So he put those in at 10%. Then he said he was going to bump them up to 15%. There's been multiple claims by the administration, but they haven't bumped it up to 15. So it's currently at 10% for 150 days. While that's going on, that keeps kind of money coming into the country that he wants. While that's going on, he's also starting Section 301 or Section 232 tariffs under the old process that he had before. And so the Section 122 tariffs essentially buys him 150 days to get through that other process as much as he can and reinstate those same level of tariffs that he had under IEEPA is the administration's ultimate goal.
And I would think, I thought those 232 and 301 tariffs were kind of more or less meant for like targeted tariffs in a sense. And he's trying to use them more as a blanketed tariff, for everybody else, and then you have to negotiate your, terms to get a better deal to get down. But so bottom line is tariffs aren't going away.
Unfortunately not.
And, I feel like a lot of it's been baked into things a little bit, but I also think that a lot of manufacturers and entities, aftermarket companies have tried to hold off and passing it along as much as possible. But there's been studies showing that, companies have only absorbed maybe 4% and the rest of it's been going to consumers.
A number of our,
so that's your inflation right there.
Exactly. A number of our manufacturers said that they were going to try not to pass that along, essentially cut into their bottom line and make less of a profit. In some instances, though, if these things were to go into effect the way that the president wanted them, some of these motorcycles wouldn't even be profitable to sell in the United States. They'd be selling certain models at a loss. And so that's where these companies are all kind of trying to figure out what's going on, what levels are going to be for which country, where are our vehicles manufactured, and how's that going to impact us. But yeah, you're right. It's been kind of all over the place. It will continue to be a little bit all over the place until he kind of gets back into equilibrium, I think. It has been baked in some instances, but a lot of it has been passed along to folks, like helmets, for example.
Right.
You're seeing prices go up, replacement parts, tires. So in all of these instances, what that results with is fewer folks coming into the dealership to buy new product, buy replacement parts, have service done. They're delaying service. They're putting off buying new gear or a new helmet because the prices are just so high as a result of the tariffs.
And, one of the things that I see is that, I think the perception for many consumers is like, oh, these tariff, when they go away, then maybe I'll look at it, but they're not going away, at least not in this stage, and it doesn't look like for the foreseeable future. Um, but even on American products, like Harley Davidson says they've gotten, had a 60, $70 million hit just on paying tariffs for components that they need, because so many components that these manufacturers need, even if they want to try to build in America and have places, have factories in America, they're still having to pay tariffs. Is that something that will continue on, and it looks like it's going to be a ongoing thing, at least for the next 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's going to be the case, I think. And what we saw even in the first Trump administration, when he put in like the steel and aluminum tariffs that he did back then, we have one member company, Reinhardt Racing. They make great exhausts for mostly the V-twin market. And, when you saw the price of the imports go up, they jacked up the domestic price of steel and aluminum to kind of meet those levels as well, both because of shortage as well as an opportunity. And so Reinhardt Racing said, look, this is hurting all of us. We have 100% U.S. manufactured, U.S. content, U.S. labor, and it's, we're suffering the same effects that the folks in China or other places around the world are suffering. So unfortunately, that's going to continue until something changes with the posture regarding tariffs.
Right. Well, and I mean, I get some of the fact that, yes, you might be able to bring in more revenue this way, and therefore, give bigger tax cuts and but it all ends up coming out of the same pile, in my opinion. Somebody's, ultimately it'll be the consumer, but it also affects business. It affects the amount of business that's being done. But
yeah, look, businesses need certainty in order to plan, right? And in order to kind of understand and to manage your inventory and all that kind of stuff. And so we saw, like during COVID, where there was the supply disruptions.
Yes.
And then we saw something similar to that, right? As the tariffs came in, because it was like it choked them off, then there'd be a time where it was lifted and there would be a flood that comes in. And pretty much all that product that had been brought in last year during those downtimes has sold through now. So,
and a lot of, from what I understand, talking to some manufacturers and other people, that now they've gone through the COVID era. They're looking at other suppliers that are within maybe the USMCA, the United States, with the former NAFTA agreement, trying to get deals there that'll offset some of the costs. But even that seems kind of uncertain.
Yeah, so we're in the 5-year review period. They just started it last week for the 5-year review of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement, USMCA. Not to be confused with the Motorcycle Coaching Association.
Right. That's the good MCA. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. So, but you're right. I mean, even in that instance, right, folks are trying to look at, okay, what can we do under USMCA to get a little bit more favorable terms? And there's uncertainty about it because it's going through that 5-year review, and you don't know how it's going to come out 6 months from now. And again, stability is what every business needs in order to plan and plan well. So.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. And, not to shift gears, but let's move on to some of the other ones, like these forever chemicals. And we were just talking earlier about like the bans in Minnesota on the PFAS. And you can say the real official term. I just call them forever chemicals, but there's the real name of them. What's going on there?
Yeah, so just for the audience that may not be geeky like me and not have to work in this stuff all the time, PFAS chemicals are perfluoral and polyfluoral alkyl substances. They are chemicals that have been around for more than 50 years. There's thousands of different variations of PFAS chemicals, and there's actually PFAS chemicals that are really bad, and there's PFAS chemicals that are far less bad. Almost to a item. In our vehicles, we use polymerized PFAS, which is larger molecules that are kind of clumped together that don't get in and they can't penetrate your skin cells. They can't get into your organs and things like that. Then there's the PFAS that partition to water. That's the stuff that's really bad, like in the firefighting foams and some of the de-icing things that they had and other products. And that's the really bad stuff. That's the stuff that gets into your water easily. I mean, even the polymerized stuff, if it's in the water, it takes forever to break down. And it's not going to, if you ingest it again, you're just going to pass it through in your waste. And so our argument has been to say, attack the bad PFAS stuff first and go after that first, and leave the polymerized stuff for kind of a second or third wave that you go after at some point. But nonetheless, we had a really bad law that was passed in Maine about 2 years ago that banned PFAS altogether. Thankfully, the next year we were successful.
Like all of it, just blanket.
Yeah, it would have been a blanket ban on it. We got our vehicles excluded from that. So that thankfully, we actually had to come back after the law was passed and amend the law. Then Minnesota copied that bill. And Minnesota was a real hotbed for PFAS because that's where 3M is located, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. They manufacture PFAS. They had, manufacturing facilities there. Unfortunately, there was a woman named Amara who got sick and died from exposure to PFAS chemicals, and had testified, a couple of days or, throughout the process, unfortunately passed away shortly before the law was passed. And that was probably the most strict PFAS law in the whole country. Included in that was a ban that started in January 1st of 2025 on any youth products that included PFAS chemicals. And so you think, right, you don't want PFAS chemicals in youth products, especially the stuff that partitions to water. But in our instance, that meant that youth-sized mini bikes, ATVs, youth-sized side-by-sides that we have out there couldn't be sold in the state. And so again, we had to go back and get the law amended to exclude our vehicles, and we were successful in doing that last year. But you're seeing these bills pop up all across the country. And so it's really just a game of whack-a-mole as we're out there trying to tamp these down and find ways that we can find either a significant runway before we have to phase this out of our products, or to get our products excluded from various sections. And those, are typically in like textile bans, juvenile product bans, and then you see just kind of all-out bans that are out there that are proposed. And so that's virtually a full-time job in and of itself for our staff person who covers that. Yeah.
And I think it seems like the more common sense thing to do is, like you said, to be able to try to split it into more of those, the ingestible type PFAS bans, because that's the one I think that would be the most, and there's probably tons of them out there. And then let's look at a slow way to, find a solution or whatever. I mean, is there other ways to build? I mean, is it in the, like I said, if it's in the polymers, it could be in some of the plastics, for instance, that are made, because those are petroleum based and have other chemicals in them,
For sure. Yeah. So it's in things like gaskets, hoses, valve stems, paint, chrome plating, that kind of stuff, right? And kids aren't typically sucking on the chrome exhaust on a motorcycle, or the gaskets that are inside the engine, or any number of these parts. And it's really important because PFAS is great at both resisting water and being highly tolerant to high temperatures as well as complex chemical blends. And so in a lot of these instances, what you see as a result of the bans that they're doing, it would mean the little gasket on your gas cap, for example, that kind of keeps the fumes from coming out and keeps the clean air violations from occurring, or keeps the risk of fumes coming out and then a fire risk. That gasket, we all remember the old days back in the 70s and 80s when we would take a gasket off and it would just crumble apart in your fingers, right?
Yeah, and those little paper crumbly things that,
Right.
They don't use those so much anymore. So, yeah.
Right. Well, that's because the PFAS has got them so that they're super durable now, and they're resistant to the chemicals, and they're resistant to heat and all that. So those are the kinds of arguments that we have to go and make to legislators. And it's understandably a very emotional issue, particularly places like Minnesota where that's happened. Our manufacturers understand that there is a significant desire to get these transitioned out of our products to the extent that we can. We're working on that, but so many of these timelines are 2026, 2027, 2032 for all out bans on the chemical. And it's just like, it's going to be very difficult to find replacements.
And you need to find a replacement. These manufacturers are going to be, and fair to say, I don't know that other countries are banning this chemical, these forever chemicals yet. So when you're talking about Europe or Asia and all these other places that our power sports come from or that go to, they don't have those bans, maybe not yet anyway. And I don't know if they're looking at them, but then you've got to find a real suitable replace. Now Teflon's bad, which I guess that's probably been a while, but it's like, okay, you got to give a minute to be able to find types of replacements for that lead gas,
for sure.
and all that kind of stuff, that happened.
Yeah, the EU is in a similar position as to the United States, a little bit ahead of us in some regards, but other parts of the world, you're right, you're not seeing that. And so if you're trying to manufacture vehicles that can be sold across the world, now you're getting into manufacturing vehicles that are specific for specific regions, not unlike, having to have something that's CARB compliant in California with the California Air Resources Board versus what's compliant with EPA.
Yeah, no, that's true. And that's becoming another thing altogether too, with all the issues again with the EPA, whether they have the authority to do that in California, but I guess California, that seems like that'll stay. So then you're looking at, again, power sport, and we know this from power sports companies trying to get stuff through EPA, like they think they can, that CARB level just adds that extra layer and like the time to be able to get something through and certified.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the other thing we were going to discuss was the Recreational Trails Program, which is the highway fund, relates to the highway fund. Again, land access, this is a big thing. SEMA just came out and saying they're going to be supporting power sports section in their show, and then they got the Off-Road Business Association part of ORBA, Off-Road Racing Business Association, yes. Anyway, ORBA, part of SEMA. MIC's hugely involved with trail access through a lot of their programs. What can we do? Because this is, I just came from a OEM, a media launch in Europe where they don't have a lot of trails to ride on. It's not like here. We're really lucky here, but there's a whole market here that depends on having places to ride. So what can we do? What's going on there that dealers and industry need to think about?
Yeah, so when it comes to public lands access, that's huge for us. Obviously, as we sell our vehicles, whether it's a motorcycle, an ATV, a side-by-side, they need places to ride them. Not everybody owns big swaths of property that they can take their side-by-side out onto. And so ensuring that we have state and federal public lands that are accessible is really important to us. We fight to grow access and prevent closures. What we advocate for responsible behavior out there, like tread lightly principles and ride with respect, that kind of stuff. We work to grow the trail networks, and that's where RTP comes in, the Recreational Trails Program. RTP is just critical. Every time we fill up our off-road vehicle or your vehicle that, say, is towing a trailer loaded with toys out to a recreation area, a portion of that gas tax that we pay goes toward the Recreational Trails Program. And it's woefully underfunded right now. We're receiving about half, I think it's about $180 million a year that we're receiving in RTP, and we pay more than $360 million a year. So it's about half. And so we want more of that gas tax dollars that we already pay in to come back to the Recreational Trails Program. That has to be reauthorized about every 5 years. This is the year to do it with the highway reauthorization. So we're asking Congress to provide more of that money, give us more of that money back that we're already paying in. And RTP is an amazing program. For those folks that might not be familiar with it, 30% of the trails that it funds are non-motorized. 30% of them are motorized trails, and the other 40% are what they call mixed use trails. And so that could be that it's a single track
Like
in
mountain
the
bikes.
summertime, and in the wintertime it's a cross country ski trail. Yeah, it could be that it's
Yeah.
allowed for both motorcycles and ATVs to go on it, or that you can hike on it as well as take horseback on it, any number of combinations of different things. And so it's really, really important, because what that RTP money does is in all 50 states, you can have access to it. You can create new trails, you can maintain your trails, you can build trailheads and restrooms, you can put up signage that's safety messaging and things like that. You can put out pamphlets regarding safety messaging, where you can go, where you can't go. It's just an amazing, amazing program that's been in effect since the 1980s. And it really has not been plussed up in, I think, close to a decade in terms of the amount of funding that we get. So
Yeah.
we really, really
Definitely
need to
need it.
get more of that back. Yeah.
How do you think
And
that looks as far as like what you're talking to legislators? Are they supportive? Do you think that it has a chance to get more funding?
for sure, there are legislators that are supportive of it. We have a bill that's been introduced over in the Senate. We're working on a House sponsor right now to have that introduced to reauthorize it and bring it to full funding level. So I think that's, it seems to be one of those programs that once you explain it to people, they totally understand it. The previous administration, I did a meeting with Secretary Buttigieg, and he was like, you start to talk off-road stuff with a guy who's in charge of the highway, the transportation department, and he's like, well, this is funded under us, and yep, it's funded through the the Federal Highway Administration. And so then I brought up a couple of different trails, one in where he used to be down in Indiana, and another one up in Traverse City, Michigan, where he lives now, and said, the Boardman Trail up there, I'm sure you've been on. Oh, I love the Boardman Trail. Well, that's funded with RTP money, right?
That's good.
So let's keep that money going, right? That's how you
right.
And once they realize the great things that are done with it, they have no problem with it. And the fact that it's already being, the money's already being taken out, because it's not like you're having to raise new taxes. It's part of the gas taxes you're already paying. So,
and you're paying a lot of gas tax when you're pulling one of our vehicles. You're pulling some of our stuff. You're paying a lot of gas, at this point. So, I think it's a great thing to have, to be able to, and it's a moneymaker. Let's put it this way, that, we know with recent data on the outdoor recreation industry, where they're saying that, outdoor recreation was 1.3 trillion to the economy, between the jobs out there and people work in the industry, but people, all the tourism that is a result of all that. So it's a huge, huge industry altogether.
$1.3 trillion industry supporting 5 million jobs across the United States. I was in a meeting with two of the undersecretaries over at Commerce to talk about tariff stuff. And it was a group of us from the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, which is an organization of kind of the entire outdoor recreation community.
Yeah.
We're one of the founding members of that. And, we were having a discussion with them, and it was like, well, how did you guys get in with two undersecretaries at Commerce to talk about this stuff? Well, when you're a $1.3 trillion industry, they got to let you in the door. They need to talk to you, right? So,
yeah.
For sure.
That's all you have. You should just walk around with hats that says 1.3 trillion on there, and they'll, pretty much guaranteed to get in the door. So, and
Exactly.
the thing is, people think of all this stuff like, oh, it's just all gas power, but it's not. There's a lot of other trails, like you said. There's horseback trails, there's hiking trails. It's the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. Yeah. It's hunting, it's fishing, it's
Yeah.
the boating industry, it's
Yeah.
Scuba. There's the ski industry. The ski industry is pretty large, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So those are all contributors to the whole of the outdoor recreation economy. And so we're really proud of the work that we do in partnering with Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. And Christy, who's our CEO right now, is actually the vice chair of the board there this
okay,
year.
yeah.
So
Well, that's
so
good to
we've
have somebody that that's from our side of things, to really help push things forward. And I think she's doing a great job. she's been really on a lot of these key issues since the beginning. So we're lucky to have her, and we're lucky to have you, you've been doing this now for a little while. I thought I'd met you 10 years, but no, you've only been there 7.5 years. So, um, but still,
Been
you've
doing
had a lot going on in that 7.5 years, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. This is my 36th year of doing government relations stuff. So I worked for a
Okay.
few years in Michigan in the legislature there, 18 years in Congress, 7.5 as appointee in the Obama administration and the first Trump administration, then came over here for the last 7.5. So, and been riding motor. This is my 51st year of riding motorcycles. So
Okay.
lifelong thing that I've been doing
Right.
and truly passionate about, between that and other ATVs, ATCs back in the day, all that kind of
Oh
stuff.
yeah.
So
No, I grew up on the ATC.
yeah,
My buddy had the 110 ATC. He got one for Christmas or something one year. He's like, "You got to come ride this thing." I was like, "What the heck?" It was like a moon buggy, or no
yeah. No,
suspension. Yeah.
I was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and right on Green Bay, the water body of Green Bay, and that used to freeze over every year. So we'd go out there, we'd do our donuts and have a
Oh
great
yeah.
time on our toys out on the water on the bay while it was frozen over, and then
Right.
come back and enjoy some hot cocoa.
Yeah. Yeah. So now you've got coming up in May. This is one of the things we need to talk about here is the Capitol Hill fly-in for the MIC. So what is that entail? First of all, when is it? And who's invited? How can they get involved? And, I think we've kind of highlighted why they need to get involved, but, what's going on with this fly-in? How is this going to happen and play out?
Yeah, well, we do a fly-in every year. This is we've done it every year since 2014, with the exception of COVID, and we had to pull down our event that year. But what it is we bring executives from around the country to Washington, D.C. And it's everybody from OEs to aftermarket to allied trades, insurance, and things like that, dealers who come. And it's really a great opportunity for them to all network together. So we do a nice little reception. It's going to be May 18th and 19th to answer the
Okay.
first part of your question. So
Yeah.
May 18th, 19th, everybody arrives on the 18th. We do a nice reception at the hotel there that night, talk a little bit about the issues that we'll be discussing the next day. Then the morning of the 19th, we get at it very early. We're up on the hill by 8 o'clock, and we're doing meetings first we have speakers who come in. So members of Congress will come in. Others from inside DC will come in and talk to us and address the group. We usually take some photos with them and things like that. Then everybody at about 10 o'clock goes off and does House meetings for the first few hours, and then Senate meetings for the next few hours. And who's invited to come? Anybody's welcome to come, but MIC members, MIC, SVIA, and ROVA, so the 2, 3, and 4-wheel side, are able to come for free if you're members of any of those 3 trade associations. If you're not a member, it's $1,000 for you to come. We, the government relations team, all you do is you say, "I'm coming. Here are the zip codes of where my facilities are." And then what we do is we match those up with your elected officials. We set up the meetings for you in advance. And then when you come, actually 2 weeks before you come, we have a list of all the issues that we'll be talking about, the legislation. So this is just covering the federal level. So each of those bills we would have listed for you, a nice summary of it. There's a longer version and then there's a shorter version. So when you're in the office and you need to reference that, you can. So that comes to you about 2 weeks out. We also do a video that talks about each one of those issues. And then we do another video that will show you what it's like to meet with a member of Congress or a staff person in that office. And then by the time you get here, you're pretty well versed between watching those videos and reading through the materials to go up and work the Hill for a day. And it's, if you've never done it before, don't be intimidated by it at all. We usually try to pair people up for a meeting or two if we can before they get in and do their first solo meeting, almost because of the density of where our power sports are kind of concentrated, right? Like California, Georgia, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, those places. you tend to be in meetings with multiple people anyhow. So it might be somebody from the tire industry in with an OE, for example, right? But really easy to do, but you're at it all day. It's a really hard day of working the Hill, both the House and Senate side. Then you come back that night where we reserve the rooftop bar at the hotel where we'll do a nice reception, be outside, enjoy the beautiful views of the Potomac, and have a great time kind of talking about what went on at the meetings, what you heard, who was helpful, who wasn't, all
Who's
that
helpful
kind of stuff.
and who's not. And I mean,
Yeah.
I did it like I was telling you earlier. I did the event like 10 years ago, and what I remember was, hey, I met our senator, who I at the time didn't vote for, but I was like, he was incredibly receptive to motorcycle industry issues, and that got my brain thinking like I need to vote for people who support our industry. So I went ahead and voted for him in the next election, and he did get reelected, so that was good. But yeah, it was Rob Portman. And
Okay.
I mean, it was like just meeting some of these people. It was like a big highlight, but also like I felt like I was doing something. You felt like you were doing something positive for the industry, for your kind of lifestyle, and to continue things on. But whether or not that something is for sure going to happen, you don't necessarily know that, but you also know that they're hearing you, and their staff people kind of hear you and kind of mark that down. So
Yeah,
um
and these are all issues that are really impacting the power
yeah.
sports business community to an issue. I mean, we've got the PART Act this year, which would require etching of VIN numbers on every catalytic converter that's out there. So whether it's on a motorcycle, an ATV, a side by side, to the extent they're on any of those vehicles, they'd have to have the VIN number etched in it. If you're trying to get a replacement, what's the first thing people do usually when they buy a new bike? They pull off the stock exhaust and they put on some aftermarket exhaust, right? That
Right.
aftermarket exhaust would then have to be etched with the VIN number of that
Oh,
vehicle. So
yeah,
you've got something like that. You've got
that would be a
there's a
big
bill.
headache. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. There's a bill out there that would, redefine the definition of motorcycles
Yes.
to basically
Oh,
exclude
the
autocycles.
slingshot would be
Yeah.
pretty, and others. The Vauxhall is another one.
Right. Yeah,
They're
Vanderhall. Yeah.
Vanderhall.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vanderhall. And there is a Vauxhall, but that's a car company in Europe.
Yeah.
But yeah, um, so yeah, and that one is kind of scary because yeah, they said these fell into the rules or the requirements of an auto cycle, and now they're trying to change that somehow, which I mean, it's got a steering wheel. It is a car, but it's not a car. It could be.
It's,
Could they put, maybe they have to put handlebars or a yoke or something in there to make it
yeah.
seem like it's more motorcycle like, but you know,
It's just
those
silly
seem
because
silly.
so many of these states have their registrations tied to the federal definition of a motorcycle. So
Yeah.
you go to states like Florida, California, Texas, Georgia, North and South Carolina, where the coasts are just kind of like littered with the rental
Yes.
shops for the slingshots and
Yeah,
stuff,
that's a
right?
big point. That's a good point. These things are okay. There are people, but they're also huge rental
Yeah.
opportunities, and they get people in power sports vehicles, and they rent and they drive around the coast and look all stylish and profiling, down the coast, and so they've gotten a lot of butts and seats, I guess to say, is from having rental companies do that, but. More than that, I think it's just a matter of like, okay, so let's clarify that, this law has been on the books for a long time, right? Autocycle's been in there for a long time.
Yeah. Yes.
So
For
it just,
15, 20 years. Yeah.
yeah. And I remember back in the day, so, and my dad, we have a Morgan plus four, but he almost bought the Morgan three-wheeler back in the 60s. He could have got one for like $900 or whatever, and he's like,
Yes.
but that was like the original autocycle, one of the first autocycles. And they built those in England specifically because they were cheaper and they didn't have as many regulations as a four-wheeler. So they were autocycles in England that came here, and that was kind of where that came from. But there were other examples, but that was a prime one.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about our flying is that, I mean, last year we did just under 100 meetings in between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m., right? So you think of blanketing the hill and getting out there and getting all those meetings knocked off with folks who have a local tie to that congressional district, right? They might have manufacturing, distribution, dealerships, whatever the case is. And those folks are talking to their members of Congress or their staff. That's gold for our team, right? I mean, I've got 9 folks here. 2 of us do federal issues, right? For the 2 of us to get into 100 offices and do
Oh
100
yeah.
meetings is just, crazy. So this is where you guys help out our industry and make a huge difference for us. And it's really, really a critical part of what we do for the government relations team. So
Yeah. I mean, I think that it has a lot more of effect. Not that you aren't effective, but when you have so many people coming in to really hammer on some of these issues, I think these politicians that they take notice of that, and they know
for
they can
sure.
see the commitment of you coming in for this kind of thing, and that,
Right.
yeah. So, and it's just a matter of trying to, hey, you're in my district, this is what I support, and I, would like to support you, whatever, but you can make this happen, and this is the reasons why it should happen, because my small business or my business will be affected if you don't do XYZ or whatever.
And they look at you and they're like, okay, Brendan came in to do this event. He spent his money to come here, spend 2 nights in a hotel. We do all the rest in terms of setting up meetings and
Yeah,
feeding you for a lot of the time and all that kind of stuff. But that means something, right? I mean, if you're going to spend 600 to 800, whatever it is that you're going to spend to come in and do that, members of Congress, when you come to them in that way, they find that to be pretty powerful. The other thing that we always encourage people to do, though, is to meet with their elected officials in their district as well.
yeah,
So when you're, if you're in Akron and you know who your local member of Congress is, and you go to meet with him or her or their staff in the office, and you say to them, hey, you know what, we'd love to have you come over to our facility when the member is on August recess. They take the entire
yeah,
month of August off. We'd like to have her come over and visit our factory, tour the floor, visit our dealership, see the impact of the local jobs that we're supporting right here, the vehicles that we're putting out, the responsible way that we address, on land use and things like that. All really, really important things. And so the fly-in oftentimes will kind of dip their toe in the water of that kind of thing. And then they go,
yeah.
I can do this. I can invite my member of Congress or my senators
Oh
to
yeah.
come over. And the same thing with your state elected officials, right? Because they're the farm team that's coming up here to
Right. The
Congress
state, and
next.
I think that gets overlooked a lot, is like, I think the state officials, your state congressmen and senators and all that, they all need, and it's not such a bad trip to go down or wait till they're off and they're in your district. I know, going back to that, we like 10 years ago, again, we had it was Senator Sherrod Brown came into my offices where I worked at the time, in another publishing company, and it was great. We just sat around a little table, a little boardroom table, and we could ask him any kind of questions that, and push different legislation at him and see where he stood or what, he was going to do about them. So, and then he kind of pretty much firmly, they know then where what issues they need to pay attention to, and where this company, your company that employs X amount of people, you know, what that affects. So,
Jobs transcend politics, right? I mean, when you see the economic impact and the
yeah,
jobs that are supported in your community as a result of what we're doing, doesn't matter if you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, a
yeah,
socialist, whatever. In most cases, you're going to say, that's a business that's good for our community. It's doing good things, and I want to be able to support them. So super important for people to educate their elected officials that way.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Well, hey, Scott, thank you so much for coming on with us. This has been great. I'm hoping I can make it this year to your fly-in. It sounds like it's going to be a great time, not only a good time, but it sounds like it's going to be very important. And there's a lot of these issues we just talked about that are going to be that, you know, these will be front and center for us to talk about. And, to try to work the hill, as they say, and make things swing in our favor for a change. I think you've been doing a good job though of keeping, especially through all that tariff stuff. That was pretty tricky. And I appreciate all the hard work that you do. And I think, pretty much all of our readers feel the same way, because without you on the front lines, a lot of us sitting back, eating popcorn, we're just putting all our hopes into what you can do. But I think this fly-in is it's an opportunity for us to, get off the couch and do something about it. So
Absolutely. Well, we would love to have you come out anytime, and I'm happy to come on anytime and chat with you about, whatever the most recent events are.
all right, well, sounds great. All right, Scott, well, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
If you like this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. We also invite you to connect with us on powersportsbusiness.com.